Hi, my name's Joe. I'm the CEO of LTI as a Service, and today I'm going to talk to you briefly about what LTI as a Service is and how you might be able to use it in your next LTI-enabled learning project. So I'm showing you a page of the LTI as a Service documentation that you can find online. And this image is particularly useful in helping you understand exactly what we do. So LTI as a Service is really a middleman that helps learning tools, that's you in the red here, connect with learning management systems in blue. Learning management systems, LMSs, are used in schools to manage learning data, and users or students have accounts there that have grade books, etc., connected with those students. And the idea is LTI, the LTI protocol, lets those LMSs communicate with learning tools, most importantly do an OAuth with the tool, and then send learning data from the tool back into the LMS after, let's say, some activity is done. So let's say that we have a learning tool that does some gamification where we're learning some math concepts. So what we might want to do is the teacher is going to go in and they're going to choose some assignments that are inside that tool, and they're going to put those assignments, links to the assignments in the LMS. And there's an automated process for that we'll go into a little bit later. And once those links are there, the LMS or the students will then log into the LMS, click on the links for those assignments. LTI as a Service will use the LTI protocol to do an OAuth to make sure the student is who they say they are, they're logged into the LMS. And then once we do that, we'll send you the information you need to authenticate the user in your system and log them in, if you need to, into your system. Not only will they be logged in, but you'll know which activity they might want to do. In this case, maybe they're doing math assignment A or B, right? So once you have that information, that we call that an LTI launch, you can then have the student use the tool as they would, go through whatever flow you might want them to do. And when you're ready, you can then request or send information to LTI as a Service. So generally speaking, there's two classes of requests that you might do with LTI as a Service. So the first thing you're going to want to probably do is get information about this specific user. So when we launch to your tool, we say, okay, here's the URL that this student has requested, right? This is the link that they clicked on. But you don't actually know who that student is yet. You have to send a request to us, a secure request with an API key, so that we can actually tell you who that student is. And so you do that using our ID token endpoint. And then you can get information about that particular student. You can get information about potentially their username or email address, what role they might have in the system inside the LMS, etc. And once you have that information, maybe you can better tailor the experience, connect them with maybe an existing account that you already have in your OAuth, your existing OAuth system or existing authentication system. And then once they finish the activity, what you're probably going to want to do is you're probably going to want to send grades back to the LMS. And you can do that with our second kind of classification of API calls, which is one where we not only are you communicating with us, but we're now, after you communicate with us, we're actually sending information all the way back into the LMS. So an example would be, all right, the student did great. They get a 99 out of 100 grade. Right? So you send us that grade request for the student. We then take that request and we do all the necessary LTI magic to get that grade into the grade book of the LMS. So in a nutshell, that's what LTI as a Service enables you to do with very, very little effort. So the next thing we're going to look at is what effort do we actually have to do to get a really basic setup up and running with LTI as a Service. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is introduce you to the LTI as a Service portal. This is our customer portal that lets you create LTI as a service accounts. So that's portal.ltiaas.com. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Okay, once we're in, we're asked to create an account. So we can give this, any name we want. My LTI tool. Right, this is a name that you use simply to identify the tool. We have many customers that have many tools, and they need names to differentiate them just for themselves. So now we're asked to create or to choose a plan. For the purposes of this demonstration, the free trial is just fine. You can upgrade this or downgrade this at any time. A free trial is perfect for just exploring. We can then choose to enable different services. These are different LTI services. So for example, if you know you're never going to be sending grades, you can choose to not have the assignments and grades service. And the reason why you might do that is because in some of our paid plans, each of these different services costs a little bit more on top of the base price. So you can save a little bit of money by not choosing services that you know you're not going to need. And there's more information about that on our pricing page. So I'm going to go ahead and create the free account. Okay, so now I'm taken to this API settings page. This is the hardest part of the entire process. You just need to choose a couple of different settings to enter in here. So first thing we need to do is we need to choose a subdomain. This is the URL that is going to interface with LMSs. So when you register your tool with an LMS, you'll be registering it with something.ltiasaservice.com. Now, if you had a keen eye on that previous page where we saw the different options, one of those plans allows you to create a custom domain. So if you don't want something.ltiaas.com, you want lti.mywebsite.com, for example, you can do a custom domain. That's an option you can choose. Not an option for the free plan, though. Okay, so let's create a new subdomain. My tool. I know that this subdomain already exists, so I'm going to put a 2 on the end. I can choose my region. Right now, you can see 3 regions on this list. If for some reason you need a different region, go ahead and contact us. I'll choose US for now. Tool name, my LTI tool. Look at that, already there. And I'll give it a description as well. The tool name and tool description show up when you register with an LMS. Those names and descriptions will actually show up within the LMS. So that's what you might want to, think about what you might want to set these to, knowing that students and teachers will be seeing these, as well as administrators. Now, launch URL. This is really where the magic happens. This is the URL after LTI as a service does that OAuth that I was talking about. This is the URL that we're going to redirect to, and we're going to redirect to you with a special query parameter called an LTIK that you can then use to understand who that user is. So this is a URL that's hosted by you on your servers. That is kind of like that landing page that you're going to send the customer to. This doesn't have to be a URL on your server. If you don't want to do any authentication, you could send them to google.com. That's fine. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and do that. Nobody's going to do this in real life. I'm just doing it because I don't have another URL that I want to use right now. Because we chose the deep linking option when we created the account, we can enter in a deep linking URL. What the deep linking URL allows you to do, like I was mentioning earlier, is you could have multiple assignments. And so a teacher might say, I want you to do math assignment A or math assignment B. Well, how does the teacher actually select math assignment A and B, and how do they know what URLs or what links to actually put in the LMS for those? Well, you don't have to worry about, or they don't have to worry about that, because you can do it for them with deep linking. So the deep linking URL is again another landing page that displays whatever you want it to display. Imagine maybe like a grid of assignments, A, B, C, D, right? And you can allow the teacher to select, let's say, assignment A, and when they click that button, you can then in your backend generate a deep linking request using our deep linking API to create the proper URL to send back into the LMS. Again, we'll just put in a dummy URL for that. What's your logo? Let's see, I think I have one here. Yeah. Okay, so choose your logo. We chose dynamic registration. This is a super powerful feature, especially if you're using Moodle or Brightspace. And what it allows you to do is the LTI registration process is actually pretty painful. What I mean by registration is you have to connect the LMS and all of its different, the URLs that do all the OAuth and things like that, with LTI as a service with all the URLs. There's like 4 or 5 of them. It's kind of painful to get them all connected up. So if you're an LMS administrator, you're used to this kind of pain. But with dynamic registration, there's only one URL you need, which is ltis.com/register. That's it. You punch in that one URL into Brightspace or Moodle, and it takes care of the rest for you. Super handy feature when you're integrating with Brightspace or Moodle. So do you want to auto-activate a registration when it comes in, when an LMS registers with your tool? Do you want them to come in automatically, or do you want them to be disabled and you first have to go in, enable them? Let's say you want them to pay your fee before you go on and enable them and allow them access, right? So that's what enable and disable would do. So we'll go ahead and submit that, and we can deploy it. So that's it. We've created an LTI tool. So we can literally register this LTI tool with an LMS, and well, today it will launch to google.com. Not particularly useful, but whatever URL you change that to, LTI as a service, after we do the OAuth with the LMS, we will redirect to this URL, and the student or teacher, whoever clicked on that link, will have access to your learning tool. So step 1, really basic LTI launch. That's all you need to do using LTI as a service. Okay, now I'm inside the Brightspace LMS, and I want to show you an example of what a real LTI tool might actually look like once you've configured it properly. So here I'm in a course with like a testing course, and I'm going to go ahead and add an activity of a tool that I've already connected with Brightspace. So I'll click Add Existing Activity, and I'm going to choose this tool that I've already, the Brightspace administrator has already installed. Let's imagine that I'm a teacher and I want to use this tool. So this particular tool has LTI deep linking enabled for it. So what's happening now is the LMS and LTI as a service did an OAuth. After that OAuth is complete, we know that this is a deep linking request, so we're sending that request to the deep linking URL. So this deep linking URL is hopefully a content selection screen where the teacher can choose which content they want the students to use, right? Or what link they want to show up on the LMS. Every LMS shows a slightly different view of this deep linking screen. Some are smaller, some are larger, so you kind of have to take that into account when you're creating this screen and kind of make it as responsive as possible. And so here's a list of all these different apps basically that we might want to add or to the LMS, different activities, right? So let's see. Okay, let's say I want to choose Etherpad. I want to create an activity where all my students are going to type an essay or something like that. So I'm going to give them Etherpad. Okay, so when I click this Add Activity link, this deep linking view that we've created is going to send a request to LTI as a service saying this is the URL for this activity. So somethingrather.com/activity equals activity ID 17, whatever. So I'll click that link. A request was sent to LTI as a service. LTI as a service redirected to the LMS, sending the information about what tool to launch in the LMS. and then we can see all the information that's showing up here. Now I mentioned that the name and the description of your tool that we entered in the API settings screen, if we go back over here, these show up in the LMS. That's true. But when we do a deep linking request, we can send the title and the description of that particular activity back to the LMS. And some LMSs even support activity icon. So you can actually see, you can have a different icon for each activity. But not all do, right? So here's the Etherpad activity that we created with that deep linking view. So now let's imagine that I'm a student. The teacher has created the activity. Now each student can now click on this Etherpad link. And what's going to happen is the LMS is going to do an OAuth with LTI as a service. LTI as a service is, once it's done that OAuth and it's happy with it, it's going to send a request, or rather it's going to redirect to that specific URL, in this case the Etherpad URL, right, that we chose. And in this case, what's happening on top of that is after my tool has been launched, and this is the launch URL that we're seeing here, after that happens, the launch URL contained this LTIK that I mentioned earlier. That LTIK can be used to send an API call to LTI as a service to get more information about this particular user. So in this case, we got the information about the user's name. Hey, the user's name is Joe. Okay, right? And so we can populate the user's name in this form. Maybe we get the email address, other information, and we can sign them in, or we can show them information about activities that they've already completed, their current score, etc. Right? And so this is a full LTI 1.3 launch using LTI as a service. Let's take some time now and look at some of the back-end code that's required in the demo that we just saw to actually do deep linking and an LTI launch using LTI as a service. So this is the back-end code that would exist on your server when you're implementing that communication scheme with LTI as a service. So the first function we're going to look at here is one that gets called during the deep linking process. So the teacher clicked on the link. They're displayed a form, which is just HTML, CSS, what have you. It can be displaying whatever you want. It's front-end code. Once they click a button, that's when this back-end function gets called to actually communicate with LTI as a service, and then in turn communicate with the LMS. So in this case, when the user clicked that button, an app ID was sent to this function. So this is the ID of the application that they chose. It could be a content ID, it could be a book ID, it could be a activity ID, literally whatever information you want to send, right? In this case, that's what we're calling it, is an app ID. And the first thing we're going to do, we can ignore most of this other code here, so we don't really need to talk about that in terms of LTI. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a request to LTI as a service to make sure that this particular deep linking button click that was made was actually made in the context of an LMS. So this front end page, this deep linking page that the teacher saw, it's a web page that's live on the internet for anybody to see, right? And so we want to make sure that the person that's actually viewing this page is in fact logged into an LMS, and more importantly, logged into an LMS that should have access to this particular form, right? So we do that using the ID token endpoint. When we make requests to the ID token endpoint, we use an API key. Let's go ahead and look where that API key normally comes from. So when you do your API settings, you've deployed and everything, the next thing you're going to do is click Generate New API Key. This will actually generate the API key on our servers and display it here. We'll never show it to you again. We can't even pull it up and grab it for you if we needed. So if you lose this key, you're going to have to go in here and generate a new one. So once we refresh this page, this key will be gone. So copy the key and then use that key when you're making these requests. So once we get this ID token, let's make sure that it's not undefined, make sure that there wasn't an issue getting it. If there was, then chances are the user's not logged in properly. We can, if we wanted to, we could get information about the platform. The platform is the current LMS that they're on. We can get information about the context. Context is the course that that they're also currently on. We're doing some advanced things here that we don't really need to worry about for typical LTI deep linking. I just want to acknowledge that this exists so you don't get confused by me kind of glossing over this. What's important is, okay, so this URL here, the URL ultimately contains that app ID, right? That ID number from the button click. We generate a URL for it. And we're packing all this stuff into this JWT. The purpose for this is so that we can pack a lot of information in the URL that the student is ultimately going to click on. This isn't like explicitly necessary for an LTI launch. We could just put the app ID itself into the LTI launch. When the user clicks on the link, we say, oh, app ID is 123. Let me load app 123. But we wanted a little bit more information here. This is kind of a more advanced, non-typical flow. So let's, for the purposes of this demonstration, let's just say that token signed is just our app ID, 123. So we've got our app ID 123, and we're going to create this link object. So if you want to know the format of these API request objects, this is something we're going to ultimately send back to LTI as a service. If you look at the LTI as a service documentation online, the API documentation, you can see the formats of these objects that are needed and how to format them. So in this case, we're going to create an array of content items. We're only going to have one item in it, and that one item is of type LTI resource link. So this is a link that's going to be generated by LTI and put into the LMS for a user to click on. And what's the URL for the link? Well, it's going to be, in this case, it's always your ltiaas.com hosted API, and then question mark or query parameters, whatever you want to put after this. And what LTI is going to do after it verifies this particular launch, it's going to take everything to the right of this question mark, and it's going to append it onto the launch URL that you placed in the API settings. So title, that's what we saw in the example earlier, and the description, those are the specific title and description of this exact learning tool that that the user has chosen. If the LMS accepts icons, let's send them and hope that they do. And that icon will show up unique for each tool if the LMS supports it. There's options and some other things that you can send here as part of this request as well. So we've built this link object, which most importantly has the URL, which has the the app ID or whatever information you want to send. And we're going to send it to LTI as a service API and to this deep linking form API call. So the deep linking form API call, what it's going to do is it's going to take the information we sent here, pack it in a way that the LTI protocol can understand, and it's actually going to send us back an HTML self-submitting form with the information packed in the proper LTI way. So we're going to send this link object to this API, and we're going to add our API key. It's going to send us back a self-submitting form, and that response here, right, is the self-submitting form. That response ultimately gets appended into the HTML view that the teacher was looking at, right? So the teacher clicked a button, we run through all this code, we send the request to LTI, LTI sends us back a self-submitting form, And then finally, we append that self-submitting form to the view that the teacher was looking at after they clicked that button. That self-submitting form redirects back to the LMS. The LMS gets the information they need and creates that link into the LMS. So that's how the deep linking flow works. So the next thing we're going to look at is what code is required when the student clicks on that link after it actually gets put into the LMS. So this /link launch endpoint that we're looking at here, this is the exact endpoint that was put, where is it, as our launch URL. So LTI as a service, if we look back up here, this is the URL that the LMS knows about. LTI as a service takes that, validates it, does the auth and everything. After LTI as a service is happy with it, it then sends it to this link launch endpoint. And this link launch endpoint is going to have some query parameters. So it's going to have our launch token, right? That's what we sent here. Could be an app ID, it could be anything. We just chose to send this launch token. Oh, too far. Where did we go? The other thing it's LTI as a service is going to send, the other query parameter is this LTIK. The LTIK has information about how to access the ID token for this particular launch. So the first thing we do after getting this LTIK, again, we take our API key and we make a request to the ID token, just like we do with the deep linking request. Once we have that ID token, we can do some more advanced things if we want, or we can just simply get the user's name and be done with it. In this case, we're saying, hey, is this platform legitimate? Is this a platform I've seen before? Is it the platform that I expect to see? We can also look at the launch context, i.e. the what course is the user in within the LMS. We could look at the user's name, email, etc. Right? We can do whatever we want with a lot of different things inside of the ID token. Once we've validated the ID token and we have the app ID, launch token, whatever other query parameter, right, that we got from deep linking, then we can go ahead and launch our application with that information. So that's all we need to do for a deep linking a launch request after the deep linking URL was created. So now you might ask the question, well, what if I don't need deep linking? What if I just need to do a launch just to my homepage, and then I'll take it from there? I don't need different URLs for different activities or anything like that. So the exact same URL would be used. The only difference is you simply would not receive a query parameter with whatever special tokens or IDs that you put in there in the LMS in the first place. So the only query parameter you would get is this LTIK. The LTIK would still allow you to look up the user, maybe you could then have your own customizations based on that. You just wouldn't get any other special query parameters that deep linking might have generated. So this is the exact same flow in terms of launching from deep linking versus launching from just a normal launch. You just don't get that extra information to then further customize the user's experience. So it's very simple here. So an LTI launch, if you need to, grab the ID token, do some validation, maybe grab their username, email address if it's available, and then launch the tool. In some cases, you don't need to do any of this at all, in which case you just launch directly to that URL and you're done. So that covers the basics of getting an LTI tool up and running with LTI as a service. If you have any questions, we've got great support via email. We also do Zoom calls and custom consulting if needed. You can find a lot more information about what we do on our website. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and thanks for taking the time to take a look.